Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to Herdwell's Roundtable Series Loud and Clear. I'm your host, Connor Franta, and today I'm here with some lovely guests. I'm here with Jay Shetty, Nash Grier, and Molly Burke. How's everyone doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, really good, man.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. Today we are going to be talking very broadly about change and the changes we're trying to make in the world and with our own personal lives. So I just wanted to throw out like a very softball question to everyone and just to go around the table. What is your change you're trying to make? What is your main focus? I'm sure a lot of us have multiple areas at this point in time, but kind of like what's the one direction? No pun intended. We'll start with you, Molly.
Okay, well, I always had so many things that I was trying to conquer and change the world with. And then I did realize that by having so many things, everything was getting watered down, and I wasn't able to put like all my passion or focus into driving home the point of like one or two or three of my biggest things. And so over the last 4 years, I've really tried to hone in on sharing my passion and educating on accessibility for disabled people and service dog users, anti-bullying, and mental health. And those are like the three that have affected me personally in my life the most, and that I want to try to use my journey and story as a vehicle to help make a difference in.
It's definitely tough because, like, to her point, like, do you want to do a bunch of things mediocre or one thing like, you know, full speed and really good? So I don't know, I definitely feel like leading by example is the most important thing you can do. So if that's, you know, watch and learn what not to do or what to do, or just, you know, watch someone make decisions, I think that's what a lot of social media is becoming. But for me personally, if I had to pick a single thing I would focus on, it'd be water at the moment, just because that's a basic human right and people don't have that still.
I'm teaming up with the Thirst Project to give clean water to those that have none. The Thirst Project is the world's largest youth water organization. Every year they bring clean water to tens of thousands of people around the world. I want us to be a part of that.
That would be the one thing, but as a person, like, I can't just, you know, Los Angeles has its own water problems, but I can't just, like, you know, 100% full speed think about how do I fix this water problem every day. I have to be actively doing that. And if you're just thinking about how to solve the problem, you're not actively solving the problem. So I'm kind of finding that balance of how can I go out and create action and do things and then raise awareness and at the same time kind of, you know, bring attention to what needs attention. And as an influencer or whatever you want to call it, that's kind of where I've been leaning. So
That's awesome. Yeah,
it could be a retweet too, like something little, little as that.
No, absolutely, man, absolutely. Yeah, I think the big word for me is education. So it's how do we make education entertaining? How do we bring education into this accessible space? By education, I mean self-improvement, personal growth, people's dedication to wanting to be better. It was Aristotle who said that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. My belief is that if people live more purposeful, meaningful, fulfilling lives, then we'll naturally give more, we'll do more for the world, we'll be able to serve more, and we'll be able to give more away. So education on the personal aspect, and then education for communities and children in the world who don't have access to any form of education, which is stopping their access to things like water, food, family, community. So I think education and education into entertainment are probably the big themes for me.
Great. That's amazing. I feel like everyone kind of handles it on a different tone, or everyone's handling it on a different realm or for a different purpose. Like Molly, yours directly affects you. Nash, you're doing something that you're passionate about. Jay, that yours seems like it kind of came out of because you were a monk for a while and you had a kind of an epiphany. So I guess I already answered the question for you. But my question was going to be, at what point did you realize that you wanted to be a change maker, I guess? Or at what point did you realize that the world wasn't perfect and things needed to be fixed? Because I feel like mine was with the Thirst Project as well, but I remember it was kind of like right after those blissful pre-teen years that you just realized that people aren't perfect, the world isn't perfect. In fact, there is a lot of improvement that needs to be made. And because I had a platform at the time, I was like, it feels wrong not to, it feels wrong not to help in some way.
Yeah. I think for me, I've always been disabled. I'm legally blind from birth, but I ended up losing the majority of my vision when I was 14, when I was in grade 8. And at the same time that I lost the majority of my vision, I lost all of my friends. I became severely bullied, dealt with situational depression and suicidal ideation. So that's where all of those passions of mine stem from, that 1 year of really traumatic experience.
Today I came back to some of the places that were the worst for me, like this forest, where a group of girls abandoned me with no way of getting out on my own. This is to the girls who did all of those things.
I've been public speaking about my disability from the time I was 5. I've been awareness raising, fundraising since I was 5 years old for vision research. But it was almost like, oh, I love being on stages and entertaining and it's fun and I'm this cute little kid and I really enjoy this thing. And when I went through that traumatic year, I stopped. I was angry at the world. I didn't want to be around anybody. I wanted to hide myself away. And on my journey to recovery from those experiences, I just had this epiphany, and I don't know where it came from, but I remember just sitting in the doctor's office, waiting room with my mom, and I just turned to her and I was like, I need to start public speaking again. Because I realized when I stopped public speaking and sharing my story and trying to awareness and fundraise, I stopped fighting for myself. I stopped fighting for change. I stopped fighting to be understood. I stopped fighting for equality. And that's what led me to feel so hopeless. And so I started doing it again. And all of a sudden, I didn't have an excuse to be angry at society's ignorance towards my situation, because I was actively doing something to stop them from being ignorant. Mm-hmm. And that felt really good. It's like I took the power back. Yeah. And so as much as I was able to help other people through their experiences and sharing my story, I actually really helped myself through doing it as well. Mm-hmm. Because it made me feel like everything I'd been through that at one point felt so meaningless was actually really meaningful.
Wow.
Wow. It's powerful.
I mean, ignorance is bliss, and to touch what you said, like you can live your life every day and block out all the problems in the world, and if you don't follow, thousands of people on Twitter like me, or a lot of people are following everyone, but it's just like you can really block out all the bad stuff and kind of stay in your own little bubble. And
part of me is a little bit envious of it. Not gonna lie.
It's so doable, and I think a lot of people are doing that right now. They're just kind of, this doesn't concern me immediately today. This isn't in my face, so it's not my problem. Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's wrong, and I think that's changing fast, which is a good thing. So I definitely like seeing how people are kind of waking up to that, and I think the internet is the biggest tool for that. So like, say you want to make a difference, and you're just scrolling through Twitter and you see something that is, it strikes your interest. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, they immediately feel the need to weigh in or give an opinion or whatever it is. I think the best thing to do is educate yourself. Like like you said earlier, like there's not a single problem that you can't fix, or even better the problem, at least by educating yourself. So
definitely,
that's what I would say.
You already answered mine. So.
Yeah. Well, I want you to. I do want you to.
I didn't even talk about the switch. I don't think it was a switch. It was just kind of like I've seen enough. Like I need to be doing more. Like every day that I don't raise awareness for something is a day wasted on my social media. And I'm sure you felt like that at one point. Like, oh, I didn't post today. I just wasted all of this, was just wasted today, because someone would have taken advantage of it. So
yeah,
why aren't I?
Yeah, there are times where I see, because we live again, and maybe it's like the more that we're connected, or maybe the world is truly a little bit on fire at the moment. But there are times where I'm like, is this my place? Mm-hmm. Is this
to step up?
Or am I just becoming kind of repetitive and like the guy who just retweets and just says people need to do things, and should I?
And doesn't actually do them.
Doesn't actually do them. Or so do I need to lead by example? Do I need to amplify everything? What's the right way? And it does become difficult at times, but. So I guess there's no right or wrong answer to that. At least I'm doing something, is usually what I always come back to.
But it wasn't a moment. It was just kind of like a day, I guess, when I realized I need to be doing more. And every day I should be doing more still. Like to this day I feel that way. So
Yeah. Jay, tell us a little bit about when you became a monk, because you were a monk for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And what was it like, I guess, opening your mind up to that world? And then what was it like? Did you have any sort of major epiphanies while you were, secluded, or while you were opening your mind? Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what everyone's saying, because I think it comes from our experiences of pain at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's like I was bullied for being overweight growing up. I experienced a lot of racism growing up where I grew up in London. So there were all of these experiences happening. And then I was really witnessing the pain of others around me. So I saw people involved in gang crime and violence and just getting involved in all the wrong circles growing up, or all the circles that now that you're like, oh yeah, I'm glad I kind of dodged the bullet on that one. And I was seeing all of that. And then I got really fortunate at 18 when I actually got to meet a monk for the first time, which was just this totally unique experience and rare experience, not one that I planned for. And I was like, oh, here's someone who looks like they have an alternative. And so it was the first time I got excited about wanting to try and be a change maker, because I got to spend time with people who are change makers in the mindset, consciousness, on deeper levels. I was like, wow, they've got some solution here, because they seem happy, they're non-judgmental, they're compassionate, they're giving out happiness, and they're making a difference in the world. They were building food distribution programs and educational programs. And I was like, wow, like how does one person do that?
So was it an easy yes to follow that
Yeah,
path?
after observing it, I was just like, this seems like an incredible life, because all you're doing is making yourself better and then wanting to better the lives of others. And that process made sense. So one of the biggest epiphanies for me was half our day was silence and the other half was service. So you spend half the day working on yourself and you spend the other half serving others. And I love that as a balance, because I think so many of us today get lost in this battle, and I do too. We're like doing so much for others, and then you're like, wait a minute, like my health and wellness is totally all over the place.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even focusing on myself. And then we also see the other side where we're like, oh, I'm having such a good time, but now I've been ignorant to what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of my biggest epiphanies, that it just made me realize the value of having me time and then having like service time or giving time, and just being able to get that balance right in life, and knowing when the signals were there of, hey Jay, you're going too far, or you need to reel it back in, or you need to do more for others, and being able to kind of monitor that. So that was probably one of the biggest things that I think is applicable to this changemaker conversation. And I think the truth is that everyone is a change maker by their example. Whether you have 1 million followers or 1 follower, all of us, it doesn't matter about how many followers you have. I think everyone is a change maker in someone's life.
Definitely.
Whether it's their mom, their dad, their sister, their brother. And I think that's where we should start, where we just recognize that our responsibility and our decisions do impact other people.
Definitely. Yeah, I fully agree. My university I went to had like dozens of Benedictine monks there, and I've had several friends go into that direction of life. And again,
wow.
And it's
amazing.
so it's been around. My dad went there too, and everything. So that's been like a facet of my life, as knowing a lot of monks personally. Nash, I have a question for you. You are going to be a father.
Yeah.
Has that already affected your outlook on the world and things that you feel like need to change, or do you think that's something that's going to come once you're actually once your kid is actually here?
I think it's evolving. So like it's changed since yesterday, and it's going to change tomorrow. It definitely changed since I heard the news, but and it's probably going to change once he's here. We're having a boy. But yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. But I don't know. It wasn't like I have a kid coming now. I need to fix all the problems in the world type of deal. But I was already kind of anxious for that and scared for that. Not for the kid part, but for it's a scary time in the world in a lot of places. Fortunately, it's not as scary in Los Angeles as it is in some other places, but it's still a scary world. So like all things considered, I had that in the back of my head always. But like you said, balance, and every day you pick and choose and your battles, and even getting in the car, I was like, we were just talking about places to live, me and Taylor, my fiance, we were like, where do we want to go? What do we even want to do? We want to stay around Los Angeles and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even want to drive out here with a kid, because like I don't even want to drive myself out here. I'm like, I have this theory that everybody's mad because they're sitting in traffic all day every day out here, and it's got to contribute some. But no, there's just things that are like, do you want to be in this city? Do you want to be in the middle of nowhere? There's disadvantages to that too, and advantages to being in the middle of all the action stuff. But yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of all at once. It just kind of overwhelmed me, and that was in the back of my head, and still kind of back. It's a little brought up now, but it's back there.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be like, because you went with the Thirst Project to
Swaziland.
To Swaziland. I did as well.
That was just an insane thing to see. The entire community would come together, and and we would see a contaminated site, and then we would see what they would do, and in literally like 24 hours we would build a well, and the whole community is just like saved now from disease, from all this, from just one well that was, you know, a couple $100.
Many lives were changed today.
It's not going to be perfect when you're changing the world. It's not just going to be like, oh, I've flipped a switch and now I haven't used plastic in 30 years or whatever it is. Like, we shouldn't be using plastic anymore, but it's going to be an imperfect revolution. I feel like it's going to be everyone trying to, everyone's intentions have to be in the right place, and if their intentions go in that right place, I feel like we'll be fine. But if everybody just keeps using or not recycling or whatever it is,
it's about opening people's eyes. I mean, even just like when I was home a week ago in Minnesota, and every time I go to the grocery store, I swear my eyes open a little bit more. Or like something happens where I'm like, oh, people are doing this and not thinking about it. Yeah. People are putting fruit in with peels in bags and then going home and immediately throwing away the bag. I'm like, what was the purpose of that?
The bag,
what was the fucking purpose of that, Janet? And things like that. I think it's just people are going through the motions of Western normality, and it's about, again, like showing people a new way or showing
a different way.
Yeah, 100%. Because
why do we always like cut it down before it's even like tried too? We're always like, we've been doing it the right way, so this other way's got to be worse. You know what I mean?
I went back and I went on Amazon. I was like, there's got to be reusable bags. That people I was like, oh look, they're right here, and like
all the reviews are better.
Yeah. And I was like, and they last 200 years, and I was like, oh great, perfect. Cloth bags makes total sense. Just never thought about it before.
Making the world more accessible is not only easier than you might think, it's more beneficial.
Molly, you're an advocate for accessibility. Actually, one of the things that I saw that I really enjoyed is that on all of your Instagram posts, you put an accessibility hashtag as well as a photo description, which is something I've never thought about before. With like technology and everything, and with advancements in so many different realms, I saw in an interview you did that you were saying that with touch screens and everything, it's actually almost making it more difficult for you at times.
Yeah.
Do you think the world is becoming more accessible, or because the world is moving so quickly in a weird way, it's not catching up?
Both.
Yeah.
So for example, this is one of my favorite really tangible examples of how far we've come. When I went blind in 2008 and everybody had those iPods with the swivel wheel.
Yeah.
Bananas. And
all of those, exactly. I couldn't pick what song I wanted to listen to.
Gotcha.
I would play like Russian roulette with my music and just like hope I landed on a song I like. And we all know how much music like plays to our emotion and like we want to listen to a certain song at a certain time. I didn't have that choice.
Yeah.
Wow.
11 years ago, I couldn't pick what song I wanted to listen to. Like, how wild is that? So like, yes, now I can use pretty much like most smartphones. I can do my email on it. I can use a lot of different apps. I can go on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, and I can be a YouTuber, and I can do all these things mainly on my own through voice programs. But the companies who are thinking about accessibility are moving forward at the same rate as advancements. So for example, a company like Apple is the world leader in accessibility with technology. They were the first company to create a voice-activated program that is in every single product they release. And Apple is devoted to not releasing any single product until voiceover is perfected on it. Wow. So when it's a company like that that's really dedicated to the mission, yes, we're moving forward at the same rate. But then there's so many companies who like, we just don't even exist. Yeah. And there's so many things, touchscreen microwaves. I can't use that. Touchscreen debit machines. I can't use that. And when I did my video with Casey Neistat a couple years ago that really kind of launched my channel, I guided him blindfolded down the streets of New York, and we went to his favorite coffee shop, and we got there, and I'd never been there, so I didn't know what system they had, and he had never been there blindfolded, so we got there, and of course it's touchscreen.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, how do we pay? It's just the two of us, and we're both blind right now. And I was like, we have to really hope it's a trustworthy barista who's going to help us pay, because that's our choice. And so I'm so thankful for apps like Uber and Lyft, which I can't drive, and they are accessible, which is great. There is, access issues when it comes to individual drivers denying me because of my service dog, which is an issue. But as a whole, it is much easier than using traditional taxis, because not only do I still have that same access issue in terms of my service dog being denied, which is illegal, but Also, a huge problem used to be because we can't see the meter, they would charge us more than the meter said. So that was a big issue that blind people used to face. Or just something as simple as, you're in a long line and you try to pay cash, well, somebody will give you back the wrong amount of cash, and you don't want to stand there counting when there's a whole line of 20 people, so you just take it and go. So there's like so many little tiny things, like everything is now becoming touchscreen. Washer and dryer machines, everything. And most of that, if not all of it pretty much, is not voice activated. So yes, we're moving forward with some companies in some ways, but we're also being completely neglected and forgotten about by other companies.
Yeah, where does that, I guess, like, where do we start that change? And a follow-up question to that is, like, where does a young person in Minnesota or a young person in the middle of Texas, like, how do they start that change in their community? Because I'm sure we have a lot of like younger people watching, and it can start from there and build up. So
I mean, of course, it starts with a conversation, it starts with awareness, it starts with education, it starts with choosing to be interested and learning about somebody else's different way of living. There's two kind of ways of looking at disability. There's the medical model of disability, which is the traditional one that most people are raised on, and then there's the social model of disability, which is what I and many other disabled people would subscribe to. So the medical model says the disabled person is the problem and we need to fix them. So we need to cure them. We need to heal them. We need to come up with a medical way, a surgery, a treatment that will fix them so they can live in society like the rest of us and everything's fine. The social model of disability takes a lot of the shame and blame off the disabled person and says, you're just fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly okay the way you are. What's wrong is that society isn't accessible to everyone. And that's what we need to change.
Absolutely.
So I think that's an important conversation to have, because when you raise young disabled people in this world where we view them as the problem, how are you ever supposed to cultivate disabled people that are strong, confident, independent leaders who feel like they can do it? 100%. You're not. And it's a vicious cycle. So to me, the social model of disability is what we really need to be talking about and making those changes. And so for me, when I first started on Instagram, there was no way to make photos accessible other than me saying #accessibility photo description. And I would work with brands and they'd be like, oh, Molly, I think you forgot that in for your editor. And I'm like, no, it's there for accessibility. Or my followers would always be like, wait, I don't get it. We can see the photo. And I was like, yeah, but a lot of my followers can't. So it's there for them. And so slowly now all my followers, all my fan accounts do it. And a lot of my followers now do it. And it's really cool to see that.
I was going to say, how do other YouTubers, is this something that you hope that everyone does, or how do since we're all online creators, how can we help further the online community in a direction that is more accessible?
Yeah, so since I started Instagram, a few years later, just a couple months ago, they started something that Twitter already has and has had for years, which I also encourage people to use, which is basically where you're able to add a photo description, and that's private. So the phone will recognize if you're using a screen reader, and if you're using the screen reader, it'll automatically read the photo description. But if you're not, nobody sighted would see it.
Oh, wow.
The reason I didn't switch over to doing that is because I want the conversation to be there. I want the word accessibility to be in your face.
Yep.
And so a lot of people are like, Molly, they're doing this thing. And I'm like, that's great, and I totally encourage everybody to use it. But I'm not going to switch to that because I want people to have that conversation. I want people to come and be like, why does she do that? And one of my other followers will be like, oh, for blind people or whatever. So I continue to do that. I like it being in your face, so I still encourage people to, if they really want to be a part of the movement of accessibility, to still put it visually there. But if you don't want to do that, then I at least encourage you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram to use the private one where you can insert it. And I've had a couple of brands reach out that I've worked with, Lush, Aerie, they all do it now, which is super exciting.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Speaking of connecting with other people, Jay, a lot of your content involves other people, and it's conversations with different types of people. You kind of cultivate a large group of unique people around you and telling their stories and sharing different perspectives. Did all of that become of interest when you were had time to think as a monk, or was that something that has always been a part of your life?
I think it's when I came back from being a monk, and then I got to see the challenges people had, and I realized that there's two sets of challenges we all have, and one's existential and one's circumstantial. So circumstantial things are I'm having a bad day and someone was really rude to me or mean to me, or I had an argument with my mom or my dad or my boss or whatever. It's like, and then existential is like, what is my purpose? What's my passion? What's the meaning of my life? Like these big questions. And I started to see that a lot of what I'd learned helped both those areas, but people were struggling with both of those things throughout their lives. And so I was like, how do we make it accessible again? Like some of the books I read are like 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
And if you pick them up, sometimes it's not about being smart or academic. It's just, it's quite hard to just understand them overnight. And so I was always questioning myself. I read a incredible thought from Einstein, who I'm a personal huge fan of. And he said that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Yeah.
And so that was my challenge. I was like, okay, I have to prove to myself that I understand this book that's 5,000 years old if I can explain it to someone who didn't get to live as a monk. And so that was my process of learning myself and growing myself, and then hoping that it could make it accessible for someone else too. And I think the biggest challenges were just, and I think we all see in the online world, it was just, you know, trolls, criticism, like rejection, the fear of failure, like people's opinions, people
It takes a lot of courage to do that and to do what everyone at this table is doing.
Yeah, absolutely, because you just get targeted from all these angles. And I wanted to see, how can we use social media to create a space of compassion, non-judgment, kind of take out all of these negative opinions. Not that it can't be a place for debate and discussion. I think those are very positive. But I didn't want it to be a place where we were just constantly, everyone's just talking over each other and no one's trying to listen. And so that was the goal. It's like, how do we first just embed that really deep value of listening, appreciating, getting to understand someone else's opinion and direction?
Definitely. Has there been like a specific moment in the change that you've been making that impacted you the most, or that sticks out to you? Has there been like a person or a trip or an experience that you're like, I will never forget this moment, or this is the reason why I do what I do?
There's been certain moments and things. Like I said earlier, I don't think I have any big moments in my life where I'm just kind of like, boom, today's the day, and shedded my old skin. No, but there's definitely those moments, and I've had a few of them. None of them are that cataclysmic, though. They're all kind of small. But one that sticks out is when I went to Cape Town. I think they're still in it. They've had this thing called Day Zero coming forever, and it's like, we're gonna run out of water on this day. And the entire 10 days that we were in Cape Town, like showering, you put your soap on first, and then you turn the shower on, you get like 15 seconds of water. And then you don't flush unless it's like, you know, a monster. And you got to use hand sanitizer. But these are just like little things. And you're just seeing like everyone take every single drop of water for granted. And they've lost, you know, a lot of that water since then. And this Day Zero is still coming. But watching like an entire society come together and reduce, you know, the water intake that they're using by like more than 100% was insane. And then to go back and like, you just see us like pressure washing, like, you know, fences and stupid shit, and we're just like, okay, well,
Was that necessary?
that waste
Was your
of
fence
water,
that
like,
dirty?
when I saw like how much they valued every single drop of water, though, it really like made me question everything. And there was a commercial growing up I saw about turn the sink off when you brush your teeth or something like that, and it's like those little things make a huge difference. So I think it was probably just saving water in weird different ways.
I've got two as well. I think one of the first ones for me was I was like 9 years old, and I was in India for the first ever time. And this was obviously before I was a monk or anything like that. I was just 9 years old. I was with my parents, and we were driving down this like highway, and then we stopped off, and we were driving past, you know, like slums for the first time in my life. I've never seen a slum before growing up in London. I've seen areas that are poverty stricken, but not a slum, which is totally different. Like, you know, mud houses, trash houses, like just, and then there's all these kids playing outside, and these kids like really happy, like they're playing cricket with like a small ball and a stick, and they're happy and they're laughing, and I'm thinking, oh wow, like those kids are my age, and I wouldn't be happy playing in that environment. And then I see this kid that like, I can't see her head at the time because it's inside a trash can. And so I'm watching this kid, and I can see this kid's head's inside the trash can, and I see it coming out, and you can see that she's trying to look for food. And then when she brings her head out, I know she didn't even have hands. Like, so she was literally using what was left of her arms to just like scrape food out. And I remember being 9 years old in the back of this car and wanting to like run out and give her something, but we didn't have any food, and we were on the other side of the road, and I didn't know what to do. And I remember just feeling totally helpless at that time, and just being like, I can't do anything. And for many years, I never even thought about that again until I went back to being a monk, and when we used to serve food and go and serve kids and go and help kids in slums. But I remember that day coming back to the hotel, and then I saw the amount of food waste that was there. Like the amount of people that had and now the stat today is we waste 30% of the food on our plates.
Dude, in the
in our
US,
homes.
we're terrible.
Yeah, you know, like again, plastic bowls from like salad bars and whatever, but they're full of food.
Yeah.
So it's food and the plastic on both. And that day when we got back to the hotel, there was like a group of people complaining about there not being enough options on the buffet, like at the hotel. And it was just like just seeing that paradox on the same day. And I'm just this kid who doesn't know, you know.
Yeah.
And then again, like I think this has been the biggest thing for me is that we, and I think all of you have been saying this before, it's just like we have to be a part of the solution in some way, big or small. Because otherwise, that's when this stuff gets really infuriating. When you're not getting to see the change, you're not getting to see the impact, then it feels like a burden, and then it feels like it's like weighing you down. But when you're doing even a little bit, even if you're doing a tiny bit, it starts empowering you, and then you feel like change is possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'd encourage everyone who's listening or watching right now is just take that step to do a tiny thing better, and you're going to feel empowered, and then you're going to empower other people. And the second thing was when I started making content and seeing, and I'm sure you guys have had this where people are messaging you. I get thousands of messages every week where someone's like, you just stopped me from committing suicide by watching your video, or you just saved me from this, or you saved my marriage, or you helped me through depression because of this. And I'm just like, wow, like that's the impact. And so I would just encourage everyone, just take one step of action forward. Be tiny, but as soon as you see the impact, you won't now look at the news and feel down.
Yeah.
You'll be like, oh, I know how to change that.
How to do something.
Yeah, how to do something.
I'm not helpless anymore.
Totally, exactly. I'm not a 9-year-old kid.
It's
in the back of the
empowering.
car.
What
Yes,
was the
exactly.
couple that planted like 1 million trees or something like that? There's this
Oh, I know
couple
you're
that
talking in
planted
their
like a forest.
backyard. Yeah, they did like, what was it? Was it one every? It wasn't one every day. That doesn't make sense.
It was
But yeah.
ridiculous. Like, but a huge change, and like it doesn't have to be like that. But if you take one step, you'll be surprised how far you can go. And
Totally.
2 people made a forest, so
Yeah.
I would definitely use that as inspiration. And like you were saying, like little things to big things. Like if you're, as long as you are doing something, and you know, like you of all people are going to be able to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Like, and I've said it before, you're your own worst enemy, and you're your own best friend, and you can kind of pick and choose which one you want to be. But if you kind of stick to being your own best friend, you'll always kind of do more in the right or lean towards it. So I would do that, and little changes, big changes.
Absolutely, yeah.
For me, I've seen so many people like just start to use that accessibility hashtag on Instagram, or kids coming to me and being like, oh, I noticed after watching your videos, like my school doesn't have Braille on any of the doors. So I went and spoke to my principal and we're getting Braille, or, you know, things like that. Or even people coming to me and saying like, you've inspired me to switch my career path to working with disabled kids or something like that, which is amazing to stories like you shared, Jay. Like all the time I have people coming up to me and saying that I've stopped them from committing suicide. And one specific email stands out to me from a man that was in his late 50s, and he said, you know, I've been planning my suicide for like 10 years, but I wanted my kids to be grown up, to move out of the house. Like I wanted to make sure that everybody was in a good place in their life so I could end mine. Oh my gosh. And he's like, you know, it was finally that time for me. Like within the next kind of few months, it was that time. And I happened to find your videos. And I thought, you know, like you just gave me that encouragement to go seek help one more time and to not take that path. And now I'm like happy to still be here. Yeah. And so to take somebody who's planning this for like 10 years and has lived with depression his whole life to saving his life and having him now actually be happy about it was incredible.
That's amazing.
And I had another girl reach out and say, you know, my disease is very rare, and she commented on one of my videos, and I just like happened to see it, and it was last week I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is my disease. And I was only diagnosed because I watched her videos and I recognized the early warning signs. Wow. So I went to my doctor and I asked and I pushed to get testing, and I was diagnosed. So now she can now have like early intervention to prepare and to learn, you know, as she goes blind. And like it's incredible to be able to do that for people.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's the power I think that we all have, is that we have such a direct connection to so many people with the internet. I used my platform back in 2014 to make my coming out video, and I had no idea like what was going to happen after that, but I had no idea kind of how many changes my life would take after that, or how much my career would change, frankly, or how much my passions would change. And like everything from that point on was driven from a point of the queer community.
I'm running in support of GLISTEN, which is an organization that is focusing on creating safe, affirming learning environments for LGBTQ+ students. They just want to make sure that everyone is represented and feels included, so it's a great organization.
Everything I do, I think about how I can have queer people involved, or how I can shed a light on a minority within that community, like Black trans women, who are continually forgotten about and continually even more marginalized. And even like now with the Equality Act that just went to the Senate, it's like, how can I help? How can I physically either physically be there, or how many, like, do we need people just to go call their senators? It's like, what can I do? And I've seen that impact on other people time and time again, but I always think back to, it was sometime a couple of years ago, I had this girl on tour come up to me. We took like a photo, and then she whispered something to me saying like, what'd she say? She said something along the lines of, I'm bisexual, but I haven't told my parents yet. And I'm like, oh, just, take your time. Like, you'll know when it's right. And she's like, no, the time is now. It's right now. They're right there. And I was like, oh God. And I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? She's like, just hold my hand. I was like, you seem very confident and ready. So I held her hand. I walked over to her dad, and I was like, your daughter has something she wants to tell you. And then they both sobbed, and then I sobbed. And it was like a really beautiful experience and exchange. And I was like, this is why I do what I do. This right here.
I love that.
Yeah, I was like, this like little but very big thing is why I make videos, or why I make content, or why I speak out on change. We all have like very specific things we're passionate about changing or focusing on change. I'm wondering, is there something that isn't in your niche of interest that you wish you could focus on more? Is there something that like you see needs your help, but you're a little bit too preoccupied in your lane?
I love hearing you guys talk about clean water and education in other countries, because I worked straight out of high school. I worked 2 years for a charity whose focus was education and clean water overseas. So I spent a month in Kenya building a school. I spent a month in rural India building a school and mentoring kids there. And that was kind of when I was in such a struggle of like, I'm so passionate about this. I've seen it. I've worked for it for 2 years, but I'm also so passionate about the things that affect my community. And it's so hard trying to make that decision of like, do I keep advocating for all these things? Or do I, it's so tricky, because there's so many things that I am passionate about, simple things like using the metal straws and things like that. But it's like, I can't do it all. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, as long as you're changing the world in some way, pat yourself on the back, because it's better than doing nothing. It's better than doing nothing. And it's good to be aware of a lot of things and do your own little ways. But the odd time when I use a plastic straw, I don't kill myself over it. Like, as much as I feel bad about it, like, I'm like, okay, Molly, you are aware, you're doing your best. Like, you
find a recycling bin.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, I think it's important not to like kick yourself or kill yourself trying to change the world and everything.
Just make it up on the back end.
Yeah, you do your best, and you work hard, and you put as much energy as you can into as many things as you can, and you forgive yourself for the rest.
Yeah. Two great things. You donated, you had a lot of hair and you donated it to a charity. You're vegan, so you clearly care about either animals or the environment or both.
It's weird, because I've been vegan for a few years now, and I wouldn't wish a diet upon anyone. Like, every single human being is different. I'm not gonna tell you what to eat and what not to eat, because it might not work for you. It might work better for other people with this blood type and this and that, and it's just like, why would one thing work for everybody? So I definitely, I'm an advocate for veganism, but I don't want to force anything on anybody. If you can help the environment by just what you're eating and what you're not eating, more importantly, then, that's why wouldn't you do that? So since water is the main one, I'd switch to food being the next one. And it goes back to food waste, because we're the worst with trash waste, all of it. And a lot of these places that we call third world countries, they've already figured out how to solve their problems. We just kind of need to help them with their solutions. Like, we go into somewhere, or we've gone somewhere, and we don't really invoke the right change or do the right things because we're not from there. We don't know what to do or to solve. And 9 times out of 10, we just need to get behind the people that know how to fix it.
It's like leading by example.
Yeah.
Even when I was in Kenya last, because they have, I think it's plastic bags are banned in the entire country.
In the whole country.
And I was like, why can't we do that?
Yeah. Do that.
I was like, what?
It's like a really easy thing.
It's really not that hard.
Man, great big story on YouTube, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to watch. This old guy in India he's been filling potholes. His son died in a pothole or from a pothole, and he's filled like 2,000 potholes. And he's like, before I go, the entire place will be pothole free. And that's just like one small initiative. He doesn't get paid to do it at all. He just mixes bags of stuff with his shovel and fills up these potholes. And I'm like, that's one person making a difference for an entire country and just using their everyday life and finding room for improvement. So stuff like that it can honestly be more important than this 800-pound gorilla idea that will take years to get off the ground. So find a balance.
Yeah, amazing. I think for me, what I'm trying to do with my content is in the mental health, the compassion, the non-judgment space. And then with my community, what I've been trying to raise funds for has been different. So obviously right now, one of the biggest things that I helped build as a monk was this charity in India that feeds 1.2 million kids a day in India. So these kids, when they have food, they get to go to school too. So it fulfills food and education, which has been really, really fulfilling. And I remember when we were doing 250,000 a day and 200,000 a day and 50,000 a day. And the people who did it before me remember doing 1 plate a day. And I think from then, the big thing for me came up last year. And this is something I haven't fully wrapped around, but I worked with YouTube last year to partner with the Kailash Foundation in India. And so the Kailash Foundation helps save children from child slavery. And when he told me the stats, and I got to meet him because his documentary released on YouTube Originals later last year, and he told me that there's 160 million children globally that are child slaves. And that's the world's largest organized crime. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was 160 million? I just couldn't believe that number was real. And he saved 100,000 in his lifetime. Oh my gosh. And he's been doing this his whole life. Like, he's dedicated to doing this. He won a Nobel Peace Prize in 2014. And so last year, my community helped raise money for that. We raised 500,000 for his charity, which was awesome. But I was like, that's something that I haven't really wrapped my head around, like brands that are like really figuring out which brands are brands that are truly ethical and conscious. Yeah, like I haven't really got involved. I got involved from the point of view of wanting to raise and save, but I think it's a big thing of being really clear about which brands are truly authentic and ethical. I'd love to understand more about that. And then the other one that I've loved for a long time is when I used to work in the corporate world, I used to be a big ally to the gender pay gap and also an ally to the LGBTQ community in the corporate world, where a lot of LGBTQ told me that it was hard for them to come out in the workplace.
It's scary. And you can lose your job.
Yeah,
30 US states, you could still lose your job.
Literally, it's crazy. And I think the UK, where I'm talking about, was very different. It was far more open. And I think for me, one thing I love being in is an ally to communities where I may not even experience that issue personally. And the reason I think that's important is whenever we'd have International Women's Day and there were only women in the audience, I'd be like, no, we need to get more men in this audience as well, as allies, as supporters. And so I'd love to, I think that's something I haven't made time for, but I would like to and can make time for, because I think being an ally for my friends who are, receiving treatment that I don't believe in is quite an easy thing to do, because it is something that all my friends are experiencing.
Definitely. I know, and that's usually how it hits home with me too, is who in my personal life, like what are they facing, what struggles are they facing, or what things, like tidbits of knowledge do I know that they don't know yet, and how can we help each other in a way. And that's usually kind of what fuels my philanthropy or fuels my drive for change.
And there's so many parallels between so many minority groups.
So many.
But so everybody just divides themselves so much. And I'm like, I grew up with mainly LGBTQ plus friends because they were different in class and I was different, so we kind of just gravitated towards each other. So I have a large passion for that community and, consider myself an ally. And it's so interesting when I try to connect with people or relate on a level about what they went through, what I went through, and they're like, no, it's not the same. And I'm like, no, I'm not saying it's the same, but like there's a lot of parallel experiences, of transition or of change or of acceptance from those around you and equal rights. And, you're talking about opportunities with work for LGBTQ+, well, 80% of blind people are unemployed, right? So it's like there's so many similar issues that different groups and people experience, but people don't talk about it. Or 90% of disabled women are sexually assaulted and raped. Nobody talks about that when they talk about, women and sexual assault. So there's like so many things, there's so many subsections, and there's so many groups that get forgotten about when it comes up to the conversation of diversity and minority groups and leadership and opportunity. It's just, it can feel like you said, like you're just sitting there and you're like, what do I do today? There's so much.
Or can I do anything fully right?
Yeah, then you're not actually doing it if you're busy thinking about what you can do. That's what's hard.
Yeah, it's always checking your privilege too. Again, like being a white cisgender male in the gay community, my problems are not that great in comparison to some people in the community. So it's always reminding myself that, and then using my privilege and using my platform as well to highlight and help other minority communities within.
Who don't necessarily have that.
Yes, exactly. And it's always trying to remember that.
I think without the internet though, like a lot would be, or we'd be a lot farther back. Like,
my God, yes.
It's really educated and opened up the discussion, and like from every aspect and angle, like where would we be without the internet at this point? You know what I mean? It's a scary world now, but like thank God that people started using Twitter and certain social medias, because like if we didn't just start discussing amongst us all across the world at some point, like where would we actually be? It's a scary thought.
People are very afraid of the unknown, and I think Twitter's kind of lifted the veil.
You can't go on Twitter anymore.
Twitter scares me sometimes, frankly. I'm like, should I open it?
I mean, do you remember when like people kind of stopped really watching the news and kind of just went to Twitter for their news?
I get most of my news from Twitter at this point.
The Twitter trending page, first of all, it breaks earlier and quicker than the news, but there was like a moment like 2014 or 15 where that was like really, that became the news like for a second, and like I feel like the majority of this next generation, that's where they go for what to do or what not to do. So
it's what they grew up on.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this whole next generation's literally been birthed with communication, on all corners of the earth in their hands. So
and so much more access to education,
change,
definitely,
and all the
and knowledge.
Yeah, there's almost like no excuse for being ignorant.
Exactly.
Forward, we're too privileged now with phones in our hands. Like, you have a phone in your hand, that's enough privilege almost for you to be advocating for something. So do it.
And it's great that everybody has their own thing, their own passions and interests that they pursue sharing.
And I think it's important we use technology for that. I think I was reading somewhere where it's like, well, if aliens found us, what would shock them most? And it was like, they'd be shocked by the fact that we have this device in our hands that gives us access to every piece of information in the world, but we're just taking pictures of ourselves.
I love that.
Just that, we could do so much with this one device. You could learn about every culture, every background, every challenge. You could connect with, you can do all these things that we're talking about right now. And I think we need to use it to that maximum capacity. We can use it to actually make a change. So
definitely. Final question to wrap everything up. Again, we have a lot of young people that are watching. So in just a sentence or two, what would you say to a young person who has been inspired watching this, or has been inspired watching, or just being on Twitter and being exposed to how many things need changing? What kind of advice could you give them?
I feel like you have to be comfortable with yourself before you can go and fight for anything, really. Like, you have to understand it, you have to learn, be educated, and that's step one. Like, educate yourself. If you're unsure of something, or if there's an issue or something happening, educate yourself. That can't hurt you in any way, shape, or form. So just do that. And if you're a young person, if you're an old person, you're coexisting. Whether you're ignorant to this, person or their way of life, or to this entire community, whatever it is, you guys are here at the same time. So you might as well at least acknowledge everyone. You know what I mean? And acknowledge your place, and then when you do that, you can go, okay, like you said, now I've acknowledged my privileged place as this person, and this is my race, and this is where I was born, and this is where I live, and this is where I'm from, and all this stuff. Now what can I do with all this? You know what I mean? And I feel like that's what really matters. It doesn't matter where you're from, or what your name was when you were born, or where you were born, or any of this stuff. Like, just if your head is on right and you trust yourself to make the right decisions, I feel like good will come. So focus on doing that.
Two things I always say is live, learn, and pass it on. So, live your life, learn from all the experiences, and pass that on to others. Share it. Don't let everything you learn and experience go to waste. So that, I think, is really important to me. But the other is, we all deal with challenge. And I always say, ultimately, people can look at my story and feel like it's very unrelatable. Like, most people don't go blind at 14, lose all their friends, and become suicidal. But the core of my story is I'm somebody who faced challenge and I overcame it. And I will continue to have to face challenge, and everybody else will too. That doesn't stop or end or change at any point. And instead of letting the challenges you face in life tear you down, let them fuel your fire. Let them push you forward. You know, every day, I still get denied access. I still get judged. I, still have people talk to my mom about my coffee order instead of asking me. But instead of letting those things upset me, I take that moment to educate that person, to talk to them, or let it inspire me to make another video. Or when somebody comments, it's like, she's not blind, instead of being like, oh, like going back at them, like, okay, well, why are they saying they think I'm not blind? What video do I now need to make to help educate people and get, and help share that? And
Instead of just being spiteful.
Instead of just being spiteful or letting it tear you down and being like hiding in your room like I used to. Take that and do something with it and be like, okay, let me show you, let me, and not in a vindictive way, but in a way of being like, how am I going to change the world so that no more people face that?
I'd say mistakes is another one. To your point, you said let those challenges build you up. Same thing with mistakes. Like every mistake you made is an opportunity to make
to learn.
To learn, yeah.
Mistakes are our greatest teacher.
It's insane. So yeah, make them and keep your head up when you do.
Yeah. I think conversations like this are awesome. Like, I feel like I've learned so much just from hearing everyone else today, and I'm like, I was totally oblivious to that. And I think that's useful, that even in your own groups at home, your friends, whoever you're talking to, just having conversations like this about the personal stories and challenges that people have is so useful. And then you're like, oh yeah, wow, like I didn't realize there was so many other challenges in this world. Yeah. And then the other side of it for me is focus on what causes you the greatest pain, and then go and take that pain away for people. Go volunteer, get involved in a community, get behind a cause. People who volunteer together, your friendships will get deeper, you'll serve together, you'll make better memories together, you'll have so much more to talk about in the future too, because you've just gone and changed lives. And it could be just something local and small. You don't have to go abroad or anything, you can do it in your communities. And Definitely. I think if people just get involved in a local cause, a local service, and regularly volunteer, I think you'll learn so much. And then for anyone who's already doing a little bit, one of my favorite ones that I remind myself that really pushes me is the words from Martin Luther King, where he said that those who love peace need to become as organized as those who love war.
Gotcha.
And I love that, because it's just like everyone who's trying to do the stuff that we all don't agree with, they're super organized and they're focused. If we really want to go against that, and if you're already doing something, then we need to be organized and focused too. It's not just about being nice and fluffy and having good positive vibes. It's like, no, we need to get focused and organized about it.
Yeah. Definitely. I know, like a total summary of all of that, as I was going to say that there's power in compassion, there's force and understanding, and like actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. So be open, be compassionate, and do something about it. Yeah. Don't sit back.
And I think if there's like one good thing to end this on is obviously like we all work in the social media world, and choose who you follow wisely, because you give that person more power and you give that person more voice. And I think there's so much conversation around like, oh, how negative social media is for kids. No, it's negative if you let the negative in.
Definitely.
If you follow people who empower you, who make you feel beautiful, who make you feel confident, who make you feel capable, then it's a really positive space. Those people who educate you and help lead your passions, that's important. And there is a lot of nothing out there. And you can let that into your life, or you cannot give them that power.
Yeah, I mean, earlier just to say something earlier, I said, and there it goes. Ugh.
Hey, you're fine.
Yeah.
Choosing who you follow.
Yeah, okay, so I was like, it's a scary world, it's a scary time. And that's true, but it's also just as true the opposite. Like, we have enough change to, make this a lot less of a scary place. So it's, you can look at it half full or half empty.
Definitely.
Totally.
I agree. Well, thanks, guys.
Thanks for
thanks for
having us.
Conversation.
This is fun.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Thanks,
bye. Good.
Yeah, cool.
That was awesome.
Fun stuff.
Yeah.
A couple photos, you guys. We might take a few photos out there, and then we'll get you out of here.
Cool deal.
We finished the water.